and really had an exciting time there, seeing sort of the grassroots startup mentality. Then decided I needed to do some blue chip, and joined Microsoft in 2002 because Avantgo was acquired by Sybase. And so I joined Microsoft 3 years, sorry, managed their communications products. So sort of like you met with Brad Garlinghouse here at Yahoo, I was his equivalent at Microsoft, running MSN Hotmail, MSN Messenger, and MSN Spaces. This is very much focused on their communications assets. So now and just in terms of international, I spent most of my my working career in international. So I've lived in Tokyo, I've lived in the UK, I've lived in Belgium. So my working life has predominantly been outside the US. So although I've got the American accent, most of my experience is very much outside the US, to almost the point where when I'm in the US it seems a bit foreign when I do talk to folks here. So definitely have your perspective in mind and very comfortable in talking with you guys.
Gervais Restaurant, authentic French cuisine in Silicon Valley.
Now my role here is, if you look at the Yahoo business, it's very much driven by the size of our audience and how much time they spend on Yahoo. And when you put that together, that essentially creates the volume, the inventory that we have to go sell, whether it be search queries, whether it be media advertising, whether it be premium services. So the company said, we need to really have someone focused on just driving audience engagement, get the largest, most engaged, most satisfied user base out there, because from that we will monetize. So what my job is to go out there and find and invest, manage, and market the products that will drive audience and will drive engagement. And so if you talk monetization, I definitely understand monetization. I know how we monetize. But my focus is to get as many users to do as much as they can on Yahoo. And then I've got a peer who looks at monetization. But again, I can speak to that as well. So that's pretty much my role. I've got a team based here in the US, but also team members based throughout our regions. And they all do a great job in terms of helping us collaborate and drive international product strategy. And we're very tightly aligned with the US teams. And we'll talk about that and some of the trends that we're seeing for international.
So when you mean driving audience, it means from the international market to
the Yahoo properties, right? So whether it be in India or in China or in Europe, my job is everything outside the U.S. And we definitely leverage the U.S. And what's interesting we'll talk about is the amazing change we've seen in the last year to 18 months in terms of how international is driving the U.S. It's a great change for us. And I think it shows some of the leverage that Yahoo brings in terms of having a global reach, but also a very local presence and feel in every market, which is, I think, very different than many of our competitors.
Gervais Restaurant, authentic French cuisine in Silicon Valley.
Tie in there actually, please?
Sure.
Because if you could just elaborate on what you meant by international driving the US business, because my understanding so far has been that Yahoo, for the past years, has been very focused on the US market and therefore sort of is not as present, say, in Germany in particular, as it is over here.
Correct. Right. And so I think we'll talk about it a little bit, but what I mean by that is the fact that we are being able to leverage innovation that we're seeing globally and very quickly disseminate that. And what we're seeing is a lot of the trends that are happening on the internet are no longer coming from the US in isolation. They're actually coming from Asia, are coming from Europe, or coming from Latin America. And one of the key challenges we have as a company is how can we identify those trends very quickly in one market and then leverage that globally. And in the past, we've built something in the US and then just sort of loaded it out to the international markets. Now you're seeing a lot of investment on our part and a lot of process in place that allows us to very quickly tap into essentially every market. In my mind, is an R&D center. Whether our team in Korea, our team in Brazil, our team in Spain, they each have a pulse on their local market. And that's the beauty of the web, is that the cost of entry is virtually zero. So any person can actually come up with a concept and start to build on it. And so we need to keep our pulse on that because things take off very quickly. And what we have to be able to do is very quickly leverage that learning and take it globally. And I'll touch on a couple of things that we're doing to drive that. We've made some amazing investments just in terms of R&D and lab centers.
So when you say leveraging, do you also leave a little bit of a degree of liberty to the different regions to create their own services, or is it always or mainly leveraging the US assets?
Oh, it's definitely, I think that's one of the unique strengths of Yahoo that differentiates us versus my experience at for example, at Microsoft or the competition is we have very much a local feel. We've got our European region, we've got our Asia region, we've got our Latin Americas region. We definitely understand it, and we are a media company, and so we have to, people are consuming our content, it has to be customized to their experience in the market, and even within Europe, you look at the experience of Germany versus Spain versus France, very different consumption behavior, and so if we don't allow for that level, a local level or flavor to our applications and our services, then we will always be struggling to compete against the local players. So we definitely need to leverage our platforms globally, but allow it to be customized locally. And I think that's something that you look at in terms of how our strategy, that's very much in line, because we're very media-centric. If you're some company, for example, my old world with Microsoft, with MSN and Hotmail, very communications, those are global platforms. You can build those in Redmond, and they can go globally. When you're trying to offer a movies experience, you're trying to offer a music experience, those are very dependent on local interests, and so you definitely have to customize that. So we need to make platforms that allow us to scale and offer more services globally versus the local competition, but also allow us to customize it and offer a more exciting experience locally. But that's a key, and that's also a little touch point I'll get on in a second, so that's a good point.
So do you have any examples of applications that came out of foreign markets?
Sure, guys, I'm just going right off. Why don't I get to that? I'm going to get through the Q1 results. I think I'm going to hit all of your guys' questions very quickly on that particular aspect. So just some really interesting stuff that came out of the Q1, and just want to summarize that with you guys. You may have seen it or not, but Yahoo, again, maintained to be the most trafficked internet destination in the world. We had our 12th straight record of record results. And we reached a milestone of having over 500 million unique users monthly on Yahoo branded web portals. 500 million users on a monthly basis come to Yahoo.
So these are active users. It's not like 3 years ago somebody signed up with Yahoo.
No,
never
these are the last 30 days unique users. Now that means that 1 out of every 2 internet users in the world come to Yahoo on a monthly basis.
I'm sorry, but how do you count this? If I am not a Yahoo email holder, member, whatever, but I go to Yahoo Maps in any given month or in 1 month, I am counted among these unique users, or?
Yes, so even if you're not registered, so we also have registered users, which represent about 50% of our user base.
So about 250 million out of these 500 million are registered.
And then there's also this other 50%, which are people who are not registered, but then do come and visit. Mm-hmm. And so that's an amazing, I mean, you think of that network that we have to leverage, and that's such an amazing opportunity for us to launch new products and tie these people together. We have a community of 500 million people that we can actually get talking together. That's why some of our most exciting products that we've been able to launch in the last few months have been all around leveraging this community that we have. In terms of revenue, so a couple more things around international. 9 out of 10 new users that come to Yahoo are from international. So that's a massive part of our growth comes from outside the U.S. And this is just fundamentally the law of numbers, right? You've got only 300 million people in the U.S. You've got 6 billion people. So, and you look at where our sort of internet penetration is starting to mature, as is Europe's, for example, Northern Europe's in particular, and some of the Asian markets. So it's really interesting to see where the growth is coming from. In terms of revenue, nearly 25% of our revenue. So our revenue in Q1 was 1.6 billion. 1.6 billion approximately. 25% of that came from international, and I think that's the points that I would like to pull out of that, because again, I care about our audience numbers, and I think those are astounding results to say that 1 out of 2 people, which is great for us, and we have hikes. We still want to go get that other 500 million, so we're not resting on our laurels, but we think it's having those 500 million people we already talked to, if we highly engage them and get them active in a community, that they will get their friends to join. We also expect, obviously, that the 1 billion internet users out there of the 6 billion population is going to grow dramatically as you see the rapid growth in Southeast Asia and Latin America and so forth. So we're going to be primed for that.
So are the users, Yahoo users, majority, are they international or the US? And then how do you explain that only 25% of revenue is coming from international if the majority users are international?
So we don't actually break out user numbers by international versus the U.S. If you look at ComScore data and NNR, clearly the majority of our users do come from outside the U.S. And that would be expected given that. In terms of revenue, you've got to look at the economic development of the online marketplace as well as the search marketplace. So monetization, the online ad market in the U.S. is just massive, 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 massive. Europe is also quite large. But then when you start talking about markets in Asia as well as Latin America, India, those markets are relative. So there's some markets that are incredibly high revenue generating for our current users. And that's where you see lots of revenue. And then you've got some that are investment markets where we know, when you look at China, you look at India, you look at even markets like Korea where the online market is now just starting to take off. So you should see the international market obviously taking a larger share as those markets online mature, both in search as well as branded advertising.
So monetization is much more advanced here, and there's things that you're going to leverage from what you do. So how many do you count in how many months or years is, for example, Europe behind the US in terms of
you know, it really depends on the different monetization source. You look at mobile, and India is doing really interesting on mobile, and Korea is doing really interesting on mobile. Search, the US is clearly very strong in search. In media, branded advertising, you're seeing some amazing strength out of Europe, in the UK, in France, and even in Germany. So, sure. So it really depends on the source of the monetization. And that's what's so great is we actually leverage that. So just as I spoke about how we leverage our product innovation globally, we also leverage our monetization efforts. So we're learning lots of interesting things out of Korea and Taiwan that we quickly bring over here for the ad sales team, and likewise the US to Europe and around. So the minute we see, when we do these comparatives of monetization per user, we then drive into what's driving that. And then try to make sure we share that within the global sales force, both for search and for branded media sales. So when I talk about some quick then trends, just touching on going beyond the Q1 announcement, but just sort of some things that we're seeing around international, just to show you why international is so important and why they've brought me on board and why they've staffed up the team, and why I think you're going to see even more and more exciting things coming from international and sharing with you. We spoke about the 9 out of 10 new users coming to Yahoo. And I think that's great. And what we're seeing is two trends. We're seeing a lot of user growth in our emerging markets. So you're seeing the markets like Southeast Asia and Southern Asia, Latin America, where these markets don't have a very mature online user base. All these new users are coming aboard amazingly. The other trend that I think is really interesting is the change to engagement. One of the things that is really important is when you look at the mature markets, so when I just speak about that, Europe, Korea, Japan, and so forth, their user growth has been growing in the last 2 years around 5 to 15%. It's pretty penetrated. What's been the most amazing thing, and there's been this shift in the last 2 years, is that the actual time that people spend online has grown between 40 and 60%. So you look at markets like the UK, which grew 40%. I think France, grew 60%, something like 57% in the last year. So the user base is growing less rapidly than, say, in the first 10 years of the internet. But what's happening now is they are spending, it's exploding now in terms of time. So if you had to sort of draw the graph of time versus, oops, that's not going to work. 1995 to 2005. As you think about an average online user spending about 1,000 minutes per user per month, and in 95, we're essentially at 0, and it sort of went like this, and all of a sudden, since about late 2003, it's been this curve. It's just been amazing, and that's what I want to talk about in my next section. Once we get through this real quickly, is what is driving this huge increase in time spent, and it's a whole different way of looking at the web. And that's clearly where we're directing our efforts. One of the things I want to talk on too is this learnings that you spoke about. So you're asking, what are the products and how are we doing this? We are seeing innovation being driven from around the globe, and we've got centers of excellence. So we've got, for example, mobile, which is really being driven out of Europe and out of Asia. We've got a whole bunch of people that we've just hired and staffing up in our London office. So it's an amazing investment that we're taking to make sure we can take that to be successful both here in the U.S. but globally. From the community side of things, we're seeing communities just blossoming throughout the world. We see that happening in France and Spain, for example. Communities are very strong. Korea and Taiwan as well are showing lots of innovation around communities. So those are areas where we're really looking at those teams to help drive learnings there. And then search, we're seeing the UK taking a lead in a lot of search activity. Korea is also, if you're familiar with the Korean market at all, they tend to do stuff about 2 years in advance of the rest of the internet. So they're an amazing market to watch, and you definitely need to tap into that and leverage that globally. On top of us making investments in centers of excellence, we've also invested in labs. So you may have seen how we've invested in the lab up in Berkeley. But we're not only interested in learnings that are coming out of the US, we've also invested in a lab in Barcelona and a lab in Santiago, Chile. And we'll probably set up additional labs. So we are definitely trying to get these thought leaders where they are. So it's amazing people, the folks that are leading our Santiago lab and our Barcelona lab. They're brainiacs. I mean, I'm more of a marketing guy. These guys, they're such thoughtful people, and they think about innovation. They're thinking 2-5 years down the road. So whereas our centers of excellence around mobile and community are thinking about here and now, these labs are making sure we're well positioned for, say, 2 to 5 years down the road. And they're amazing people.
What do they look like, these labs?
Yeah.
I mean, is it giving money to university researchers, or?
It depends. It sometimes has been, so here up with Berkeley, it's actually a collaboration with Berkeley, and in Santiago, it's essentially, I mean, they're not labs in the sense of where there's all these chemicals. You know, when I think of labs, you think of like these labs with people in mocks and stuff. It's essentially research centers where they can do lots of innovation around search, for example. So getting lots of PhDs who can really do some thoughtful analysis and do some really good data analysis to come up with just wacko ideas that, you know what, right now may sound crazy, but that's what we need. Is we are so focused on the day-to-day running of the business, looking at trends here and now. We also want to make sure we have people that we're looking further in front to help drive where we're going. And I tap into these folks at least weekly, where they're helping me refine some of my strategy. The Berkeley lab being up at Berkeley is very helpful, as well as the folks in Barcelona. So,
how many people do you have in Barcelona already, and is it growing?
We don't actually disclose employee numbers by region or by even market. So it's essentially a lab is as much as we can share with you now. But it definitely is staff of people, and they are hiring. And I think they can probably talk to you more specifically about the labs in detail with a follow-up, if that's okay. But I'm just so excited about them just because they give me such insights into what's going on. You know, the really, to use the wrong word, maybe the real geeky stuff that I love, but don't have quite the time to dive into. And so that's what's so exciting there. So,
and how long do you think it takes to from what they do in the lab and actually become a product or project or?
So these have just started. So this is in the last 6 months that we have actually done these initiatives. So I can't tell you anything, you know, that specifically has come out. It's just what helps me now is it even just refines my thinking and the way I approach looking at whether it be community or search or media consumption. They just look at things in a very different way that just it's good to pull me out of that. And also by being, again, reinforcing the international side of it, they just bring a whole different, not only perspective of thinking further afield, but also what's happening in Europe, what's happening. I mean, who would have thought we would have had something down in Santiago, Chile, right? But there was a gentleman down there who's absolutely brilliant, and to have him as part of the team and to build a team out of there, fantastic. So we should do more of this. So to your question then, how have we done this? A number of products have come from international. So there's an amazing product out of Korea, which is called Knowledge Search, which is Answers. We've launched in the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. That's been a phenomenon in both Korea and Taiwan. And we quickly realized that and said, wow, let's take advantage of this. And we've launched it now in a number of international markets. And it's a very unique way of approaching search, and we'll talk about that in a second. You look at things like MyWeb, which also came out of Korea. A lot of innovation that's coming around mobile. So Yahoo Go Mobile essentially came out of Europe. So there are a number of massive platforms that we are seeing coming out of international that are now launching here in the U.S., but also launching elsewhere. The same people, Korea should be as interested in what's happening in the U.S. as what's happening in Europe. Okay, and Spain should be as interested in what's happening in the U.S. as what's happening in Australia. So we definitely need to to accelerate and take advantage of our global reach. It's not just our audience, but it's all this expertise that we bring to bear, which is so exciting. And that's why my head is always just bursting, because Australia will send me something and Taiwan will send me something, and to keep it all straight is crazy. And that's why we needed to really focus on that and take advantage of it. The third trend that I would look at that is beyond just sort of the amount of user growth and the learnings that we're getting is the fact that one of the things I constantly look at is how do we compete locally as a global company. You'll see us investing in platforms, and that's how we can scale out of the costs and some of these massive platforms. And let's just list some of these platforms that require huge investment, that when you can scale over 500 million people. So if you think of a market like the UK with 23 million online users, someone there that's locally focused on the UK market won't have the ability to fund these massive platform deployments like Yahoo, which has 500 million users. Messenger, Mail, our 360 and Groups platforms, Yahoo Go Mobile, Yahoo Go TV, our Answers platform, our music platform, our search platforms, our photos platform. I mean, the list goes on and on. These platforms are ones that we can very effectively build, whether it be here or in Korea or in Taiwan or in London, and then quickly deploy and scale our costs across 500 million users, which allows us to do much more innovation along these platforms. And then again, building those platforms such that they can be localized to meet local requirements.
Gervais Restaurant, authentic French cuisine in Silicon Valley.
Why does it? Excuse me for cutting in there, but, since you're talking about quickly deploying these platforms,
yep.
Last time I checked, at least the German Yahoo was, let's say, a lot thinner than the American Yahoo in terms of the portfolio of these platforms.
Yeah. Same thing for the French Yahoo.
Sure, and I think I would say that if you looked at the progress that we've made, so I would agree with you that there has been a disparity. It's probably because, to your point earlier, that there was this major focus on the U.S. Say 5 years ago in 2001, 2002. Yahoo really had to get everything sort of in order in the U.S. But made amazing progress. But then if you look at the kind of investment we've made over the last 2 years in Europe, the acquisition of Kelku for shopping, which gave us a real strong position in shopping. The commitment has been there, and also I think you look at the number of products that are shipping globally over the last, say, 6 to 12 months, and you just wait for the next 12 months. I mean, that's what my whole focus has been, is I want to make sure that when you look at the German site or the French site, that you find it comparable to the U.S. site, and that means that we need to get the U.S. teams. We're a relatively young company, and to get a U.S. company to think globally requires a certain amount of culture change and education on how to build things. You think of small startups when they first start up, they're not thinking about how do you internationalize code, and then how do you localize it in 38 languages. So it is a challenge to move from a U.S.-based company to a global, and so that's just something that takes time, and that's why I'm on board, is to actually help us create the processes and invest in the right way to build these global platforms. So I agree with you, both markets. Again, that's where we've got to solve, and that's where you're going to see a lot of really these global platforms benefiting. If 12 months from now we're across the table, hopefully we have a chance again, and you're saying that, then probably they should be firing me, because my whole job is to make sure that you want to stay on the French site. You're not going to come to yahoo.com in the US.
So this has been going on for the past 6 months, you would say, or longer?
I would say is for the last, it depends on how you define this, right? So we've been offering global solutions for the last 10 years, right? It's the question of where my role has been trying to force us as a company to think more when we build products, to think globally on these platform side of things. We tended to have Europe building their own products. You had Asia building their own, US building their own. There's lots of scale and leverage that we should have been doing earlier, and that's what I'm trying to do, is how do we connect these people up? And when you bring that scale, that helps a lot to driving innovation. So whether it be Europe doing mobile, Asia doing search, the US doing community, we should build that once and then deploy to many.
Talking about the localization, well, how do you do in China market to do content censorship? How do you technically or strategically, how do you do it?
So I don't know the way that we interface in the Chinese market, so I'm going to pass on that one just because I'm not as familiar with what's going on with Yahoo China and Alibaba and the way that we interface with that. So I'll defer to these guys.
We can catch up about that too on the censorship question. I can take your
Yeah. So, because my expertise is definitely more around product and audience, so I'm not quite sure on the legal and all that sort of noise. So I can claim sort of extract myself. So let me
just to come back,
sure,
because you mentioned the Kelco acquisition.
Yep.
So when is it does it make sense to make an acquisition and to build instead of building and deploying and etc. internally?
Yeah, there's a buy versus build versus partner approach that we take with everything, and there's a time to market. There's an audience. It's a fairly complicated, process when you look at these. I mean, Kelco had an amazing platform. It had an amazing position in Europe. It fit in really nice culturally to our portfolio and our European team. So, it was just a nice thing. And another example I look at in terms of deploying it is actually Kelco was an acquisition. It essentially came with a shopping platform. We've now deployed that platform in a number of international markets. So we've actually used that platform and taken that to other markets, which is another example of how we're able to leverage scale.
But not in the U.S.
Not in the U.S., correct.
So you have two shopping platforms, two
correct.
More.
Correct.
Is there a greater target that you're working to? Is there like something that they told you to have 50-40% of revenues coming out international by year X? Is there any?
I would love it to be 95% coming, but again, no. There's no targets that obviously that I can share as well. But again, I think it's just, for me, revenue is very important, don't get me wrong. But for me, I'm all excited because I know in a lot of markets right now it's in an investment mode to get the audience, to get them happy with the Yahoo products. And so that's what I care, whether a market is really highly monetized like the UK or Taiwan, or still in a developing mode like India. I just want to get really engaged users and offer the most amazing products and have the right marketing strategies.
So you're driving page views more than advertising?
For me, exactly. My role is page views. And that's probably a good segue. Let me start talking is that the page view is almost becoming the wrong metric to some degree because a lot of services, because of some of the changes that have gone over the last year to 2 years, you need to start looking at page views. You need to start looking at time spent. So, for example, I don't generate any page views. Well, one, when I watch a video or I listen to music. But you're seeing those two trends as being a huge amount of time spent. So when I look at a metric now, I actually look at time spent as being the best monitor of engagement and how much people are really enjoying the web and engaged with Yahoo and the web in general. So let me just map out a little bit. This is my little sort of dog and pony show. And let's see. And this is so what I want to just really quick talk about, you guys, and I'll probably do this for like 10 minutes, and then we can open up the last 15 minutes for questions, is just talk about this curve. Why do I see this happening, and why are all of a sudden we're seeing people going from 600 minutes a month just 2 years ago to now 1,000 minutes? What has caused that 400-minute, that massive growth that's all of a sudden accelerated? And what I use is and you'll hear it used here quite frequently, is we've gone from the first 10 years as being something like the web, which I call as a very one-directional. So if you think of the web, think of your experience. This is fairly basic. I'm sorry for the camera because I'm moving around, but so that's the way I'm going to hear it. So essentially, if you think about it, you had the web, and you had your PC, and there you were. And you were essentially a passive participant in the web. You were consuming what the web had to deliver on your PC to you as an individual. Your ability to contribute to the web was fairly limited. You click the search query. That's pretty much it. And this was pretty much driven by the mass media companies, right? So that they would design a website. You think of it going to the BBC in the UK. Somebody said, here's what everybody wants to see, and whether you went to the BBC or I went to the BBC or you went to the BBC, you see exactly the same experience. It was fairly boring, right, relative to where we are today. And so what we're seeing is a change, and it's just, I've been in the internet now since, 97, so almost 10 years. And I've never seen such a change in terms of the engagement and the sort of discussion on the web and acceleration of usage. And what I look at it now is essentially it's our web. And the way I explain this is, and we've gone from the web to our web, and I call power to the people. And if you're familiar with the US back in the 60s, there was the sort of summer of love, the cultural revolution that where all of a sudden people said, wait, 50s was all about control, government, and all of a sudden the people took back society. They said, it's going to be more open, it's going to be more about us, flower children. And that's how I sort of, in my mind, think about what's happening on the web right now, is that all of a sudden we, as these passive consumers that are doing what we were sort of told, we have now said, hey, wait a second, we want to actually make the web our web. We want to contribute to it. We want to be the ones that drive it.
Why do you think that's happening now? Because Amazon, for example, has since its inception allowed any and everybody to contribute in exactly the same way that we're seeing now happening all over the place.
I think it's a combination. I think broadband. So when I look at one specific item that has allowed us to accelerate the sharing and our ability to start contributing to the web, it would be broadband. You're always on. It's so much easier for you to go to the web. All of a sudden now, it's got the same kind of connectivity of your television or of your phone. So broadband makes just using the web so much easier, let alone broadband makes the amount of what you can do on it. So whereas before, this was, back to here, was pretty much all text with a bit of images. Particularly when you're in dial-up. Remember how you'd sit there and I'm not going to load this image up because it takes too long. Now I don't even think about 2 seconds about uploading 100 pictures or a video. So there's some trends that are, how are we making this the power of the people? How are we making it our web? And there's a couple of things that I look at, and there's four main ones, big trends. One, we can now participate. It's no longer this unidirectional flow, but we now can start adding our voice. And think of all the ways that you now, it's so different. And I know, let's talk about this. I'm talking about mass market. So for example, blogs existed 3-4 years ago in a very, very micro way. In the last year, you've seen blogs just blossom in terms of usage, right? So I'm talking about trends mass market, not, because the internet was around 30 years ago if you technically look at DARPA and such. But now I can participate. I can do blogs, podcasts, video, photos, ratings and reviews. My ability to start, before I was just consuming, but now I can start contributing. And once I start getting comfortable with contributing, just sort of adding a little bit of a voice, the next phase is I start creating. And I start posting my blogs. I start really actively adding my voice to the web. So this is one big trend that we're seeing, is that we now have an ability to participate. We all can start adding our voice to the web. The other trend, or number 2 trend, is we now have choice. And this sort of goes on a little bit around your comment about why is this happening now. There's 2 things that are happening here. Broadband. Broadband now gives me the ability to have a much broader choice of consumption. So where in the past I was text and images, I can now listen to music, I can now watch videos, I can look at photos, I can talk with my friends. Broadband has opened up just an amazing choice of the kind of media I can consume, which previously I was stuck with television for broadcast, I was stuck with my phone for voice, and those are controlled by others, and they sort of schedule the broadcast of what show at what time, and I have no control. So broadband is one thing. It's given me, I can play games, music, like I said. The other one is where I want. Mobile, TV, PC. So you think about this massive changes happening here. It's no longer text and image, but it's video, it's high quality photos, it's audio. And here now, I can't draw a phone very well. Let's say that's the phone. Happens to laptop, doesn't it? But anyway, and then TV. The choices I have as a consumer now of what kind of media I want to consume on the web and where I want to consume it is radically different than it was 2 years ago. So now I can actually add my voice to the web as a consumer. So I am a person on the web starting to contribute. I have choice of how I want it. The third trend is personalize. Whereas before, BBC created it, and everybody saw the exact same thing. What we're seeing now in a trend is that internet sites are having to offer a personalized experience. So Amazon's a good example, who's offered that for a number of years, but it hasn't really taken off until recently, where what a company can do is very easily identify your interests and then help you discover information on their site that's more relevant. So, when you come to Yahoo, you read certain articles, you perform certain tasks. For example, I never look at sports. I'm not a big sports fan. But why, in the past, would Yahoo show me sports headlines as part of the news? They should know that I tend to look at tech, I tend to look at business, and I tend to look at world news. So it'd be great for them just to create a personalized experience for me and let me customize that so that my experience with Yahoo is a unique relationship one-on-one, and it's very different than yours and very different than yours. And so that's another big trend, is that the web is being personalized for a unique relationship one-to-one. But it's not only sitting there on this one-to-one. The fourth and final trend is the web is allowing us to connect. So this is what broadband is doing. So if you think about it, before, you interacted with the web, and that was the story. What now is happening is I can interact with the web, you can interact with the web, Mary can interact with the web, and we can interact together. And this is much more prevalent today than it was 2 years ago, whether it be with instant messaging, with VoIP, with the communities that are being built. And again, I'm going beyond Yahoo. So you look at Facebook, MySpace, Skyblog, Wretch in Korea. I'm trying to think of other examples. There's massive examples of communities being built globally. And so the trends around being able to talk to each other as well as to form communities is pretty massively.
But then you don't need to have the central server. You can connect peer-to-peer.
Right.
Gervais Restaurant, authentic French cuisine in Silicon Valley.
So is Yahoo involved in that? Because Yahoo Messenger is still client server. You still go to Yahoo, and so but is peer-to-peer maybe breaking what you're trying to establish in terms of
peer-to-peer is just another way of delivering the service. So for example, I don't think that peer-to-peer actually disaggregates Yahoo, because it's the services that sit on top of it. So for example, if I do peer-to-peer with you, but it's around it's us being able to share our music playlist, it's all around an experience. And so what Yahoo believes is that we bring the most amazing combination. So what we try to do, and we're going to talk about this in a second real quickly, is we are definitely focusing on these areas, because if you do peer-to-peer or server-based or client-based, there's a variety of options to create the best solution for the consumer, and that's what I care about, right? But again, I think that technology by itself isn't what drives consumer behavior. It's the experience by which that plays a role in. And that's where I think if you look at whether it be our music offerings, our community offerings, that's just another component of it. So what's interesting, if you look about this, is that now you can see why the people power is so strong in the last 2 years. Because now, as a consumer, I drive the consumption on the web. I have choice. I have a personalized experience, and I can connect with all of you. So that's where you're seeing the 600, this huge growth. If you look at the categories that have grown in the last year, if you went on NNR or ComScore, it's been all around communities, it's been around communication, it's been around the blogs, the podcasts, the reviews. It's been all of this that has been driving the growth in internet usage. It hasn't been the mass media, it hasn't been the BBCs that have been driving this. It's been all this new stuff that can power the people. And so where has Yahoo been focusing on in terms of these areas? This is core. So we are now putting, where you see the people on the outside of the internet, what I would say is we're making a people-centric approach to the internet. We're putting people first and building out solutions around that. And so when you look across these, we've made a lot of great investments and product development over the last year that reinforce this. So you're looking at participating. Just amazing stuff that we've got going on here. If you've used Flickr, what a great phenomenon in terms of allowing you to start sharing and sort of doing photojournalism.
Is this a worldwide phenomenon?
Yep. I mean, the example, I'll talk about it in a second, but the example is, for example, the first photos from the London bombings came from Flickr. So if you looked at the BBC, all of their pictures, the videos were all that were uploaded to Flickr. So photojournalism is right. When we had Hurricane Katrina, it was just amazing to see the Flickr. And we'll talk about that in a second, because that's playing a massive role in what's going on. So there's Flickr, there's a company called Delicious that we acquired, podcasts that we launched, WebJ, which is music playlists, our own photos client. So there's a number of products. What I want to do is I want to make sure that Yahoo has the products that allow everybody to contribute to the web in the way that they want so they can add their voice. So I would love to have more content coming from you as end users than from the mass media. That would be my objective, because that means that we are actually taking back the web for ourselves.
But how realistic is it that this, which is sort of, it's new and everybody all of a sudden starts their own blog and does this and does that. But how realistic is it that people will really invest, because this takes a lot of time, both looking at all your friends' blogs and pictures, etc., and doing all the stuff yourself. So how realistic is it that this will go beyond the fad phase and be sustainable?
I just look at the activity that people are using, and it's amazing. And I have to use my example and my family's. When my mom and dad, who are in their 60s, start doing their blogs. I mean, for example, one of the things that I use for Yahoo 360 is for photos. So my mom, they've made it so easy to start to share photos of the family and kids and so forth. So I think what you're seeing now is what's happening here is typically offline activities that you did in the past or that you were unable to do are now coming online. And that's why I don't think it's a fad. I think it's changing behavior. And again, it goes throughout this, whether you be comms, you're taking voice from the phone, whether it be TV, you're taking away broadcast and you're now watching. Now, I don't look at TiVo. I just look at TiVo as the first phase of us controlling our media consumption, right? Right now, you record and can watch as you like. The days of where you control, where a broadcaster controls the timing and showing of shows, I think it is clearly numbered. Mm-hmm. I love when I can go home and just watch. And now I've got, so it goes into the second one, right? Choice. In broadband, you look at what we offer for broadband. We've got games, we've got music, the #1 music site where you can watch videos. We've got our own video site, and we also have mainstream video that we offer through our news and our other sports categories. So we are definitely offering what people want on broadband. And then here, this is where Marco, for example, who you interviewed, has really made a lot of investment coming from Europe, is Yahoo Go Mobile, and then we just had Yahoo Go TV, which just launched yesterday. So again, we are extending our reach, the experience that you want, so that when you want to have Yahoo, you can have it anywhere, how you want it. And let me tell you, that allows us to offer a much richer experience when we can start delivering to different modes. If you remember the mobile, I remember being in Europe 5 years ago when we first got there, not long ago. Everybody was trying to put the PC experience on the mobile phone, and that and the same thing happened with television, with MSN TV and so forth. So now it's like everybody's realizing, wait, people want different experiences in different scenarios. And then in terms of personalized, so this is Go Mobile and TV. With personalized, we've invested a lot in back-end platforms. This isn't something that you would necessarily see on the front end, except in a number of our products, it's integrated. So if you go to movies, if you go to music, if you go to My Yahoo, what we have is we've made a massive investment in back-end personalization platforms that really any particular individual competitor would have a difficult time replicating. This is where we can really bring our scale in terms of delivering platforms. And this allows us to then offer a very personalized experience for you, for me. Which again, as an audience person that I am, I really want you to have this close affinity with Yahoo. I want you to be able to notice when you come to Yahoo that it's more personalized than when I go to some other site. And that's really, really important because that drives value. And then finally, Connect. We've launched voice over IP, PSTN connectivity with Instant Messenger. We've launched our 360 community, so really tapping into the community phenomenon. And then if you look at some of the things even around community, even the stuff like Flickr, we consider that a photos community. So we definitely, if you look at everything that we've done in the last 12 months, falls in to meeting the needs of where we're seeing the growth and the switch from being the web to our web. And I think a couple of the big areas that you see us in is search. So what we can call social search. We think we can make search better through people. Okay? So whereas in the past it's been all algorithmic, so it's back-end computers telling you what your search results should be, 22 million results for mountain biking. That's great. Okay, help me make that a little bit more relevant than 22 million search results. So we believe that on top of algorithmic, which is very important because it can really help make the search experience relevant, we should start tapping into all of our collective expertise to help make our search experience better. So there's a number of things like MyWeb 2.0, which we just launched an enhancement a couple weeks ago, I guess. MyWeb 2.0, which is a great way of sharing your search experience with others. So when I searched for mountain bikes for 22 million results, also what I'm able to find is that there were 13 results that came from my community of people who had tagged my web. And so I quickly said, okay, wow, these people, I know that they like mountain biking. My best friend likes it. So I went to his tags that he had set for mountain biking, and they were incredibly relevant for me. So as opposed to looking at 22 million, I was able to find within my own community, my web, relevant search results and tap into that and get a much more relevant experience in search than just the algorithmic. So we really truly believe that this whole people-centric approach will help me make my search experience better. And then the other example where I'm seeing this happening is in our media businesses. For example, news and music. You're seeing that when I no longer believe that a mass media site in isolation is going to be as successful as a site that combines both mass media, so mainstream media like BBC or AP or ABC News or whatever the mass market media company is. That in the future it's going to have to be complemented by end-user generated content in my community. I'm going to want to see, so you'll see on our sites, for example, we've integrated Flickr photos into news results. So if you went to Katrina coverage in the US as an example that I like to use, not only did we have the AP Newswire feeds and stuff coming from all of our different major mass media partners, we also had Flickr integration, we had blog integration, we had video integration, and we saw massive, massive usage of both the mass media component, right? You want to read the main article. You need that. You need the expert who's writing about it. But we also saw huge interest by consumers to then start exploring what consumers think. Let me get a first-hand experience as someone who is in New Orleans. Let me see some Flickr photos coming from people who are there. That's what makes a highly engaged news property, when you start combining both the mass media but also the people together into a really rich experience. And so that's why I think if you compare the approach that we are taking to news, for example, to that of the mass media folks, they can't do that. And finally, music is just another one I would encourage you to go take a look at, is that it is a definite, amazing thing where we've allowed you to personalize your music experience. So now we offer a radio experience one-to-one. We can have you rate and review what music you like, and then we can recommend up essentially a playlist that's unique to you. So when I go listen to Yahoo Radio Pop, it's going to be unique to me versus you versus you. I can also say, please let my community influence that personalization. So I know people who can influence what I listen to, and it makes it even a richer experience. And I can watch video, I can watch end-user generated content, and I can even go to groups that are fan sites that are built around the bands that are showing in the videos or that I'm listening to. So if you look at the experience in the past, it would have been a radio station that was one-to-many. Now what I can do is I can get an amazing community experience, a unique listening experience that also I'm able to share and enhance with the people that I know. So that pretty much takes you through what I think is the sort of the cause of this massive uptake in engagement on the web, time spent. Really is all people-centric, and then how Yahoo is actually really playing into this and seeing some concrete examples of where it's just making the internet experience so much more exciting and engaging and enlightening. Which makes me real excited because I love the fact that people can now add their voice. So that sort of gives you, I know it's quick and I ran a little long.
So Yahoo, does Yahoo have a video product for participating, just a little bit like YouTube or maybe Google Video?
So we have Yahoo Videos, which allows you to search and find videos and play videos. We're actually the #1 video streaming service in the world. We also have a service in Korea right now, which is called Yami, which is the #1 video service in Korea, which is just like YouTube. And I would actually call it YouTube on steroids. It's an amazingly rich experience for end-user generated content to go online, and we've done it. What's interesting there is we've actually, there's a TV show that is created out of the end-user generated content in Korea. So it's actually the reverse now of a show, a TV going from new media to old media in Korea.
So eventually that would be
video. We've had that for decades.
Exactly, right. And now it's just coming from the internet, so they look at that, you submit it.
So when can we expect Yami, you said, to be launched in other geographies?
We don't announce sort of future product plans, so I would just stay tuned to. We think video is a key component of our strategy going forward. It's just like audio, just like video, images, text. We want to make sure that we offer a complete suite of tools to allow the user to start participating on the web.
But it's a product that we can expect to show up in different geographies.
No comment. But just let us assure that video is a really important part. And clearly, we've got from our acquisition of Matchcast from years ago in our Dallas facility, great innovation there.
Yes, you have to ask the question. We understand. So
Yeah.
thank you, David, so much. And I'm sorry to ask questions.
It's the overall strategy to build, as you said, build once, run many, and then basically, if there is 2 Flickrs in different regions, the idea is to just make one.
The concept is to allow to let markets innovate and build their own. We don't want to stop that innovation, but we identify a trend. Let's quickly make it a global platform. But when we make these global platforms, it's not that we just say, okay, let's make it as it was built in that market. We'll then go get requirements from all markets to make sure, to your point earlier, just want to tie it in, is that when we launch a platform, that it has the relevant features for the local market. Because the Korea product, it may be great, but it may not work in France. But the platform itself the experience might be fairly good. So we want to take that, build a platform, but also make sure we bring in all the other markets so that when it does come to France, it probably will have a different look and feel, but the back end will probably be the same.
Great.
Gervais Restaurant, authentic French cuisine in Silicon Valley.